This Ganiza hand blender was broken. I shot a video with this sort of split screen setup, but the quality was and I thought the whole thing was running way too long. So for all of you looking for a quick fix, here's what the problem was and how I fixed it. Following this condensed version, you can watch the entire video with the repair process and all the finer details. But here we go. The hand blender wasn't turning on at all, which would indicate an electrical problem. So this end, remove the plastic disc, pry off the control dial, then these two Phillips screws, careful here because there are some very small pieces which you could potentially lose. This plate comes off, and plug these two connectors, one for the LEDs and one is connected to the control dial. There we go. Gently pull out the control board. You'll have to tease it out because there's a lot of stuff in there, including push buttons which press down on micro switches right here. You will find right here a 4 amp slow blow fuse. New fuse, heat shrink tubing, and solder that in, and then reassemble the whole thing. That is the shortest version possible. In reality, I've repaired this unit twice already in the last 6 months. Once was to swap out the really cheap plastic power cable, which had split right open because of plastic fatigue. And then more recently with the fuse. But the first repair, taking the old cable out and putting this one in, the traces on the control board had ripped right off. So I soldered the connections right onto the next available component. And it worked perfectly for another 3 months. Now this is good for another few months. So if you want to see the entire version with more details and the pitfalls and the traps, well, it's coming right up, so enjoy. This hand blender is in my workshop because it's not working. And not just not working, because there are several types of not working. There's the, it's buzzing along, it's grinding, it's not working, it's not turning, or there's the dead. There's nothing going on. This is the nothing going on, dead type of not working. So this Ganiza model represents a whole range of these types of inexpensive bought online hand blenders. So whatever repairs I do here to get this working again would probably apply to many of these hand blender types. But first, let's try to power it on. Make sure power is actually getting to the unit. If it's battery powered, are the batteries sufficient to power the device? And if it's a rechargeable device or uses rechargeable batteries, are they charged? And or is the charger working? Yeah. As a shortcut, I'm using a non-contact voltage tester. Tried and true. I've had this for many, many years. This senses the electric field in a wire without the need for metallic contact. So, and if we unplug, yeah, at least we know that power is making it to the device, partly. Because sometimes the conductive wires inside cheap plastic power cables will sever from too much bending. You can often feel these kinks and bumps within the wire, especially if your device works intermittently, depending on how you maneuver the wire. You'll see this happening mostly with hair dryers, curlers, power supplies, also known as wall warts, and many other handheld devices which are constantly moved around. That constant motion and jerking can eventually break the connection within cheap power cords. If the problem was more mechanical, I'd go in this way by removing 2 long Phillips screws. Well, no. Well, actually, they're not that long. You could also slip off this metal casing. But here, this end is where power is routed in. And that's where the electronics and the control will be. This is where the problem will be. Yeah, I gotta align these perfectly. I was wrong about the long screws. These are short screws. Once you take this off, there are longer screws keeping everything together on this end. Remove this plastic cover gently because 2 small clips holding it in place might snap. Pull the ring controller off. Though it feels like it'll break, persevere and gently pull it as straight up and away as you can. Again, gently. There we go. Once it's off, a small plastic rod and spring will try to escape. You'll often see this type of setup, usually a metal ball bearing, pushed forward by an even smaller spring, to give you some sort of input feedback, allowing your fingertips and ears to register the movement of a sliding or rotating controller. Once 2 more Phillips screws are removed, you can partially pull this round plastic plaque away. Unplug these 2 connectors. One is for the LEDs, the other is wired into the speed controller. Then you can draw out the controller board, but only so far before something binds up. It's connected to the motor, and micro switches and other components on the board might interfere with the spring-loaded push buttons. This is about as far as I can pull this out, but you can probably see my handiwork from when I soldered in the new power cable. The traces had ripped off the board, so I soldered onto the next available components. There's a fuse right here. Using the continuity function of a multimeter indicates this fuse is blown. But there's always the possibility that a fuse will test as being intact due to the circuit completing itself not through this direct path to the fuse, but working itself around the circuit, circumventing the blown fuse. So you use the lowest ohm setting on your meter. If the reading is lower than what you get when you're touching the leads, this fuse is blown. There was a time when hand blenders didn't need a fuse. There was also a time when the term "no user serviceable parts within" wasn't a thing. Some appliances had a reset button instead of a fuse soldered onto a circuit board, which makes the majority of consumers simply trash these items and buy another one, over and over again. Now, I'll be going outside to shout at kids on the sidewalk or the sky. I'll temporarily bypass the fuse just to make sure there isn't another problem down the line, like some other blown component. Because then, maybe all this wouldn't be worth the effort. With a jumper wire circumventing the fuse, no, simply pressing the button won't work, so I'm plugging that round plastic disc back in. though I later found out that wasn't necessary. And using a non-conductive wooden stick thing, in this case a wooden spoon, to trigger the micro switch inside the handle because the push buttons are out of line. It works. Voila. It's definitely the fuse. One might say it is the fuse. So let's remove this blown fuse. Unplug everything and pull out the board. Remove the shrink tubing. And I can't see what's stamped on this. This solder sucker does a great job of releasing the fuse from the board. I've got a video on these tools which I'll link to.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Perfecto. Wow. Amps, 250, 4 amps. 4 amps, there we go. Slow blow fuses. I'm not sure why the heat shrink tubing had been applied to the fuse. Maybe with everything crammed in such a tight space, the manufacturer didn't want to have anything short out. So I'll do the same for the replacement fuse. Bend the leads of the new fuse to fit into the board. Then apply flux. There's a section of exposed wire, so I'll slip some heat shrink tubing over that too. That should do the trick. Solder. Then snip off the excess.
Functional.
Some 99% isopropyl alcohol is used to clean off the excess flux.
Try to get some on the This should work.
Grab a wooden spoon. And for some strange reason, I sort of look a bit bummed. Packing everything back in the handle is a bit of a pain. The board has to slide back into a tight slot, far enough so that the push buttons activate the micro switches, but you have to be careful while pushing this into place. There's lots of stuff which can snag in there. Plug everything back in. And reassemble. Just do the disassembly, but in reverse. If at all possible, absolutely, get yourself a small container. I like to use these because they're magnetized and they got a heavier rubberized base to keep small parts in as you're working. They keep stuff off the floor as wires, let's say from a soldering iron, are sweeping all across your workspace, yeah, you absolutely need one of these. A smaller one, bigger one, you need one. Found it. So small. There is another problem which came up while using it. I've got other people living here with me, and sometimes they're just not as considerate with these wonderful precision tools as I am, and they'll just jam in the adapters, whirly turning stuff. At doing so, this is forced down and back, and sometimes this will catch. And it won't do it now, but it'll stay there. And it just gets jammed in there. So you've got to find a way to release it. I'll bring this back upstairs to the kitchen, and I'll be able to keep my power tools in my workshop.
Everything in its right place.